Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing. I'm your host, James Kelly. My co-host for today's show is Janet Coursey, and our guests are Adrienne McLean, Jeff DePew, and Richard Devin. The topic of today's show is Techniques for Writing, Developing, and Selling a Script, Part 1. But first, we would like to start with a few fun quips. And Rich, would you like to start?
Sure, I have one for you.
Okay.
So this is about minimum wage. 3 guys are sitting at a bar. The first guy says, "Yeah, I make about $200,000 a year after taxes." The second guy answers, "What do you do for a living?" Number 1 says, "I'm a stockbroker. How much do you make?" Number 2 guy says, "I should clear about $100,000 this year." Number 1 says, "What do you do?" "Well, I'm a architect." A third guy has been sitting there quietly, staring into his beer, when the others turn to him. Number 2 says, "Hey, how much do you make per year?" Number 3, I guess about 13,000. Number 1 goes, "Oh, yeah. What kind of books do you write?"
And that's the truth.
I know. And Jan?
Hey, did you hear about the writer who jumped out of the window on the 15th floor? He could have gone to the 16th, but that had been another story.
That was
bad.
Adrienne?
Oh, priorities. A writer comes home to a burned-down house. His sobbing and slightly singed wife is standing outside. "What happened, honey?" the man asks. "Oh, John, it was terrible," she weeps. "I'm cooking. The phone rang. It was your agent. Because I was on the phone, I didn't notice the stove was on fire. It went up in a second. Everything is gone. I nearly didn't make it out the house. Oh, poor Fluffy." Wait. Back it up a minute," the man says. "My agent called?"
Yeah, priorities. Jeff?
Now, this is actually a true story.
Right.
In my classroom, I was explaining about double negatives during a grammar lesson. I was saying how a double negative always forms a positive. And in some languages, though, like Russian, the double negative is still a negative. And I said, however, there's no language where a double positive can form a negative. And this kid pipes up from the back of the room, "Yeah, right."
There you are.
All right, Rich.
Wait, I didn't get that one.
Oh, gosh.
I'll have to wait for the replay.
You need to take Jeff's class.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Mine is, if Moses were alive today, he'd come down from a mountain with the 10 Commandments and spend the next 5 years trying to get them published.
Yeah. And he actually did them twice, the first 10 Commandments he broke.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
that's right.
Yeah. So it's pretty much the same thing. All right. Our first guest is Adrienne McLean. Per IMDb, Adrienne is an American actress and producer known for her movie Dating Games, L.A. in 2011, Vitamin C in 2013, Guard Dog in 2015, and as well as the beautiful and deadly Gambian spy Oleander, who speaks Arabic, Russian, and nails a British accent in A.K.A. The Surgeon in 2015. Adrienne's broad range goes easy from stage to screen, where she has always delivered high performances in various genres, from comedy to action to drama. And Adrienne, what made you decide to tackle writing a screenplay?
Well, as any actor who sits by the phone waiting for it to ring, I decided to, maybe start writing my own stuff.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
And you took a class that I also took with Kelly Schwartz on producing independent films. Do you plan on writing and producing your own work?
Definitely. I definitely plan on writing and producing my own work. I'm more in the short films or skits right now. Those are kind of things that I think are easy, but I'm definitely interested to hear the panel talking about, books and full plays and scripts. Film scripts as well.
Yeah. We're going to talk about, too, how, we can go from book to script and all the ins and outs of getting a script into production. Where can we learn more about Adrienne McLean?
Social media. The wonderful world of social media. Yes. All that. IMDb, Facebook, Instagram.
Okay. If you're just tuning in, I am James Kelly, and I'm the host of Aspects of Writing. My co-host is Janet Coursey, and our guests are Adrienne McLean, Jeff DePew, and Richard Devin. And again, the topic of the show is Techniques for Writing, Developing, and Selling a Script, Part 1. And Jan?
Our next guest is Jeff DePew. Jeff has been writing stories and screenplays for almost 20 years. He is a regular contributor to the Never Fear horror anthologies, published by 1330 Books, as well as a managing editor for 1330 Books. His work tends to be dark, although he doesn't. But he does occasionally blend horror with comedy. Jeff currently lives in Henderson, Nevada, with his beautiful wife, Mary Beth, his children, Joseph and Annabelle, and somewhere between 4 and 5 cats and dogs. He's been a high school English teacher for over 20 years and holds a master's in educational counseling.
All right.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Jeff,
pretty impressive, huh?
Yeah, I'm impressed.
And we've discussed this, but we're going to do it on the air. You are a licensed paranormal investigator, a red belt in Taekwondo, a titled Lord of Principality of Sealand. He has a doctoral in occult studies from Miskatonic University, and according to a certificate on his classroom wall, for which he has paid good money, he is a member of the Illuminati. So you want to explain some of that for us, please?
I can't talk about the Illuminati.
Okay. Sure.
I am a licensed paranormal investigator. I took an online course, and I took an exam, and I passed. And my next goal is to become a licensed UFO investigator.
Okay. All right. And so you're really into the paranormal then, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, I like to write about it. I like to read about it. I am interested in it, yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, where else can we learn about your work, Jeff?
You can go to jdepewauthor.com. I'm on Facebook, Amazon, and on Twitter, Lord DePew.
Have you written any screenplays? I know you have.
Yeah, I've written a couple. One was optioned, an action adventure called Golden Gate. It's basically Die Hard on the Golden Gate Bridge. And then another horror that didn't quite do what it needed to do.
All right. I normally would be reading this, but I'm going to let Rich tell us, because you can break this down better than I can. What have you done?
Is that like something that's going to send me to prison? What have I done?
Well, let's see. I know you've written for Southern Nevada Equestrian.
Oh, yes, that. So I've written, currently I write for, I've written 4 1330 books in the Never Fear series that Jeff is also in.
Okay.
Jeff and I have co-written a couple of screenplays, Golden Gate and Hell's Gate. We also did a television pilot. I was in L.A., and when I was in L.A., I was an actor first, having moved from New York City to be an actor in L.A. to do more film and television.
So what way they recognize you in as an actor?
I was on General Hospital a lot, Port Charles, Wayans Brothers, Major Dad, a couple of pilots, a cooking show pilot called, what was it called?
Cooking with Romance?
Cooking with Romance, thank you. Jeff remembers. Cooking with Romance. Things like that. And then I've been writing now a couple of different books. I have a book out called The Third Hour, a couple books for the showbiz trade, actors' resumes, and Do You Want to Be an Actor?
And you have an option screenplay?
Yes, I have an option screenplay. The one that Jeff was speaking about earlier, Golden Gate, was optioned by William Catt. William Catt, you may remember, was the greatest American hero.
Right.
He had that television show. Well, he formed a production company, and Jeff and I actually wrote Golden Gate for my cousin, a gentleman named Robert Urich, who is now no longer with us, but had tons of television series. And so we wrote it for him, and then William Catt's company picked it up, optioned it. Ultimately, they didn't want Robert Urich in it. They wanted to kind of develop it for someone else. So that was optioned for a good deal of time with us, or with them, and went into somewhat of a development. It never got greenlit, and it never went into actual production.
Okay.
But it's all part of the process of writing screenplays.
What is Golden Gate about?
So Golden Gate is an action-adventure film. It takes place on the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, and terrorists try to blow up that bridge, and it's about then us stopping that happening.
Oh.
And did we write that before 9? Yeah, long before 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were ahead of the curve. We wrote it long before 9/11. Now I don't know how that. Well, I guess they do a lot of them still. So.
Oh yeah.
That kind of genre. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
But that was, like I said, I described it as Die Hard on the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah, it was.
Like, that one that Steven Seagal did was Die Hard on a boat. There was Die Hard on a bus.
Right.
So
Right.
it was right in that.
Exactly.
That wheelhouse.
Yeah, and it was at the time that they were doing so many of those that we wrote it.
And you also are an award-winning playwright?
Yes, I have a couple of plays. My one play called My Mother's Coming was produced in Los Angeles, had a nice long run with extensions, and it won the Foundation for the Vital Arts Award, which was an award presented to me in New York City, where I was called the gay Neil Simon writer.
What advice can you give the novice writer, regardless of what genre they're writing in? Because you write all over the place.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good
You
piece
print
of
children's
advice.
books too.
Oh yeah, I have children's books out there that I actually
that's
wrote.
right, yeah.
So maybe that's a good piece of advice. Listen, I may not have been successful in like huge Hollywood terms anywhere, but I've been successful in things have been optioned, things have been produced, things have been written, things are out there. I have a book right now, The Third Hour, which is currently in development with 2 production companies. So my advice would be maybe write anything and everything. Just throw stuff out there.
Don't pigeonhole yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It's like spaghetti on the wall. Just throw the spaghetti on the wall, see what sticks, and then go with it. Don't be afraid to just go everywhere.
You know, I think that's probably a misnomer in this industry. They think that if you write a science fiction novel, you should stick with just science fiction. And the reality of it is, at least today, I don't think you need to do that.
No. As a matter of fact, Jeff and I both write for 1330 Books, and we've written romance. We've written horror.
And sci-fi.
And sci-fi, yeah. So it's just like whatever came up, we were like, okay, I think I can do that. And I know you're working on a couple more, like horror and or sci-fi things, right?
Yeah.
UFO stuff.
Well, you know, Sidney Sheldon, he wrote all over the place as well. He used to have pseudonyms for a woman's name when he wrote romance.
Right.
Because back then they did want you to stick with whatever genre you were writing in. And the same thing with Stephen J. Cannell. You know, Stephen J. Cannell had like 42 shows on television. You know, he was all over the place as well. So I think you don't want to stifle yourself as an author or as a script writer even. You know, you be free to write whatever it is you feel like writing.
Especially now, because when you do become successful is when they're going to pigeonhole you. And that means that you're only going to be able to write what's selling and what's being produced by that production company or that publishing house. I have a really good friend, Heather Graham, who's a #1 New York Times bestselling author all over the board.
Right.
And she originally started in romance, and they did not want her to write outside of romance, so she had to then change her name to write outside of romance. Now she writes thrillers, and she's a #1 thriller writer because that's where she really wanted to go. And, of course, through the course of that, she had to change publishing companies, but that was okay to do. And that's why I say, like, you can get pigeonholed. Her publishers, it was, well, I won't say anyone. Her publishers at the time didn't want her to write something different because that's where they were making their money.
Right. Well, you know, and it's the same way in scripts. You know, if you're known as someone who writes like a Die Hard series, they're going after you for that specific type of writing. So it's the same way in scripts, and that's what we're going to talk about today is parallels and pretty much the techniques you need to get further on what you're trying to do. I want to ask you too, because we've talked about this, and you didn't say too much about it. You're just getting ready to create a Kickstarter campaign, and what is that campaign for?
Well, actually, it's an Indiegogo campaign, which is the same as Kickstarter.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of fundraising, public fundraising platforms out there. But I'm on Generosity, which is part of Indiegogo.
Okay.
And the reason I'm on Generosity is because there are no fees involved with that one. But you need to be raising money for a nonprofit organization of some type.
All right.
So I actually formed a new company, a publishing company called Invoke Books.
Okay.
And Invoke Books is doing a whole line of dyslexic books because I'm dyslexic, and so we're doing a whole line of dyslexic books.
Okay.
And we're starting off with the first 10 Wizard of Oz books, and we're just reformatting them in the dyslexic font.
Okay, now I'm curious.
Yeah.
Explain to me how you're are you writing the words backwards, or what are you doing?
We scramble them all up so the I unscrambles them.
Yeah.
There's a font out there called Open Dyslexic. It was a font that was developed which has very heavy and thick bottoms to it, so it helps the eye kind of read better. It helps dyslexic people. It's hard when you're dyslexic to explain what's happening when you read the page, but the numbers and the words kind of get scrambled up. And this, by having a heavier bottom, the font that is, helps keep your eye moving in a linear fashion. Right. It's much better.
Right.
So anyway, we're doing all of these books in dyslexic font, putting them out there. They're going to be totally free, and that's what my Indiegogo or Generosity campaign is about, raising the funds to publish these books to be given to dyslexic organizations and dyslexic readers completely free.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That sounds
But
fabulous.
you can do it for screenplays, and you can do it for a whole bunch of other things too, not just to limit yourself.
Yeah, right. And I actually know someone who did that, who actually produced their movie through Kickstarter. They went after 100,000, and then they found what's called angel financing, where someone says if you can raise X amount of dollars, then we will match that. What I think one of the stipulations, I'm not positive on this, but I believe one of the stipulations was she had to attach a name to the project. It doesn't have to be like an A-list actor necessarily, although I think she did get one. But the thing is that, so there is other ways of going out there, not just Kickstarter or Indiegogo or some of the other funding sites. You can actually get some money through angel financing and get that set up before you go after the other, and that way they can match you. It's kind of like getting grants. Pretty much
now, do the investors get something back? Is that
Yes.
part of the agreement?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how that worked, because I know when you go on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and specifically on Kickstarter, you're not supposed to offer any percentages. So I'm not sure how that worked, because the actual funding for the angel financing, they agreed to match whatever they raised was in place before she went to the Kickstarter. And Kickstarter would have to know about this, because this was part of her video to go after the funding. It was, if you watch the video, it was actually part of that video saying that.
Right. On Kickstarter or any of the other public funding platforms, you give something to someone for an amount that they're going to donate to your campaign. With the other ones, like Angel Fund, is it called? The one you spoke of?
Well, there was Indiegogo, Kickstarter, Angel Financing.
Angel Financing.
Yeah, Angel Financing, is...
I think what they'll do is ask for some kind of back-end deal on the
That's
film.
what I mean,
Right, yeah.
but I thought on Kickstarter you weren't allowed to offer percentages to anyone. But in any case, that is what happened. And they actually tell you in the video where they're announcing the movie to give you incentives that that's what they're doing. So they obviously knew about it.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, if you can raise X amount of dollars, you could possibly go out there and find angel financing. But an investor's going to want to know a little bit about you. They're going to know who you are. They're going to want to know who's a principal in the movie. They're not just going to probably just make a deal with anybody. It just turned out that her husband was on #1 comedy on television, and she had Jason Ritter in it, those all help. But the point is that she did get the money that she needed to produce this movie, and I was very impressed. I went to the premiere, and it really, for a low-budget film, it felt like a major motion picture. So there are ways of doing it. I'm sure she did some bartering. I'm sure that they bartered for the cameras to shoot with. Probably a little bit of bartering with the location, I'm sure there was a lot of that going on.
Or they just went guerrilla and just went out there. Guerrilla.
Yeah.
Guerrilla is when you go out there and you don't get permits or anything. You just
do it.
Shoot fast and run.
No, I think they had permits. But yeah, we're going to have someone on after this who does a little bit of what we're talking about, bartering for, spots or locations or whatever they need. Cool. And we're going to go into the group discussion, which is... I would like everyone's take on whatever I'm talking about. How important is a script writing class, do you feel? And have you ever taken a script writing class? And Adrienne, I'd like to start with you.
I have not taken a class, no. I have a couple books. I'm not sure if I've read them yet. I have a couple books. Right now, my goal is just getting pen to paper.
Okay.
That is the goal. So that's kind of where I am.
What about you, Rich?
Yeah, I've taken a bunch of script writing classes, actually. When I was living in L.A., I went to the American Film Institute with AFI and took a couple of screenwriting classes there as well as acting classes so that I could try to work one into the other. They had one class that was really great where the writers were in like the first hour and then the actors were in the second hour, and then the third hour everyone got together, the writer and the actor, and so you kind of acted out what they just wrote in the first hour. And it was really kind of cool to see how that works and watch the actors bring those words to life and add a lot of life to those words.
I like the way you segued in the third hour.
I bring third hour up always.
Yeah. And Jeff, what about you?
I've been to some script writing classes, any writing class. I'm a big believer in if you're going to do something, you got to surround yourself with people who are doing it too. So take classes, go to seminars. Right. When you live in LA like we did, it's super easy. Yeah. I mean they're all the time. But if you go, I'm sure UNLV has. In fact, Don Lewis Barnhart used to have a class that he taught. And I take script writing classes, and I also take classes on how to get your work in the hands of producers, because it is such a tough industry. And even if you're networking and you know people, that doesn't mean they can always open a door for you. So you've kind of got to get in there and jump in and try and learn as much as you possibly can on your own. And I will tell you that I very much appreciate the classes that I've taken on script writing, because I started script writing on my own in 1995.
And, you can buy these softwares like I used Final Draft in the beginning, which is pretty much what the standard is in the industry. And it does a lot of work for you. I mean, it's really kind of neat if you've never done it to just jump in and next thing you know, it's suggesting a character for you. You go, yeah, how'd they know I want that one to speak, So it's kind of neat, but you do need to really learn the narratives of it because that's the hardest part of script writing, I think.
Yeah, it's very structured.
Yeah, and, it's not like a novel. A novel you can elaborate. In a script you really can't elaborate that much. You can set up the scene, but you're pretty much just doing it in short bits here and there, interior, exterior.
Yeah, really, because it's the skeleton.
Right.
That's all it is. And you're, as a script writer, you're writing the skeleton. You're writing the outline, basically,
right.
for the film. And then on that, you're going to have the director and everyone else who's going to build on that.
They're going to build your set
right.
for you, yeah.
So you want it to be skeletal because you want to give those other people the opportunity to embellish upon it, to give it life. So it is very hard, I think, as a writer to write scripts because you have to be so lean and clean and still get your whole idea out there.
Right. And you know what? That's the one thing that I think I do backwards because I prefer to write the script first and then the novel. And almost everything I've written the script first and then the novel. And we're going to have Kelly Schwartz on after this show, and that's exactly what he says he does too. What we were talking, or I've discussed with him is the fact that it's difficult in a way if you go out there and try and make the movie and then put your book out. Because it's the opposite, really. If you get your novel out there first and develop an audience with the novel, those people who read are probably going to want to go see the movie. But if you write the script and put it out before the book, the problem could be is that you don't have as broad an audience because someone who's seen the movie may not necessarily go buy the book to read. It can happen. It has happened.
Right. I agree with you. I think it's probably not a bad idea for those who are interested in writing scripts to maybe write the script first, use it as an outline, write the novel, and then get the novel out there published and sold, and then go back to the script.
Right,
because
get
then
that following.
you have something that's it's more in depth, and I think you'll get a broader spectrum of people possibly buying into it, and then you can put it out there for awards. The novel, that is, put it out there for awards, get it out in publicity. I think that's a great way to go.
Yeah, and and more they're adapting books to film. Yeah. So you can't go wrong by doing that. It doesn't matter that you wrote the script first. No one needs to know.
No, it's just that'll be your outline.
Yeah.
So you're writing your own novelization.
Yeah, you really are.
I mean, someone's going to do it. You might as well do it yourself.
Now, for me, the script is easier because I don't have to go into as much detail. And maybe it's because I write backwards. I do the script and then the novel. Because once you get to the novel, now you have to start elaborating because you can't have your script 80 to 120 pages. I mean, well, you can have the script 80 to 120 pages, but you can't have a novel that's 80 to 120 pages unless you're just writing a short story.
I think you just discovered a new class. Just write the script first, and then write the novel. No, really, I think there's a really good way to do it.
I love it doing that way.
Now, what's your planning like? Like, do you have a whole outline, and do you use the same outline for your script and your novel?
Actually, when it comes to writing a script, I don't have a format. I do it just like you would a novel in the sense that I'll write down ideas and stuff, and then when I'm ready to format or put together the script, I'll start here, and then it works its way forward. It's difficult because you do have to keep in mind it can only be between 90 really to 120 pages. So that's something you have to keep in mind when you're writing a script.
Do you ever think of a line, like maybe a line of description that won't work in a script, but it'll work in a novel, and,
yes.
And you write it down?
Yes, I do. And that's the great thing is because I'll think about something, I'll think, oh, that's too much, it's too wordy, I can't get that in here. But you know what? If you write that down to the side, when you go to write that book, you can add it to the book. And even characters, there might be little characters here and there that add flavor to something. You can't necessarily do it with the script,
right.
But then when you go back to and write your novel, you can incorporate that into the novel.
A lot of times in scripts, characters are combined.
Yeah.
So you could do the opposite.
Exactly. You do. It's exactly what you're doing. You're breaking it apart. You're creating, and also the descriptive part of it. That was one of the flaws that I have, and I've been told from the editors, is that when I write my novels, I don't give enough description, they say. I need to be more descriptive. And in my mind, I am, because when I wrote the script, I wasn't that descriptive, so I've described more than I didn't. But they said you could be just a little more descriptive when it comes to the actual narrative in the novel. I actually write short stories in the sense that most of my books are around 200 pages, whereas most novelists are anywhere between 240, 300 pages, I suppose.
Yeah.
And that's probably because I write the script first, and so I'm used to, having a... But I managed to tell the story in that few pages, so...
It works.
I've also been told that my novels read like a movie.
Yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
We actually write that way, too, when we write a lot of our stories, and we think of that specifically. Like, I'm going to write this story with a lot of detail and a lot of color, but how would one be able to take this and kind of strip it down a little bit and make a movie out of it? Like, I'm going to talk about the third hour again. When I wrote the third hour, that's exactly what I thought, is how is this going to be a film? Every single thing I ever write, I think about it as how is this going to be a film? My play, My Mother's Coming, we actually tried to turn it, well, we were trying to turn it into a film, but we took the play, which has a lot more in it than even a screenplay, and we had to strip out a lot out of that to turn it into a movie. And then you had to open it up at the same time, because the play is written for one scene on one stage. And then suddenly now you have to have the screenplay that strips out a lot of it, but at the same time opens it up a lot. And that's a pretty difficult thing to do.
All right, so what do you think is more difficult to write? Because I've never written a play. So a play, a screenplay, or a novel?
Screenplay.
Screenplay?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's screenplay, too.
Yeah.
Over the play?
Oh,
I
yeah.
would think that would be the most difficult.
A play, you can put so much more in. Here's the thing. When you are a writer of a screenplay, you write the screenplay and then you're done.
Okay.
Really, you're done. You wash your hands of it. You sell it, it's gone, it's done.
Right.
When you are a writer of a play, you're involved in every single bit of that development of that play. They want you there. The director wants you there. The producers want you there.
Why is that different?
I don't know. Maybe it's just the way the movie industry works is like they don't...
They just want your idea and they're going to...
I think they don't value the writer as much.
They have their own vision.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Whereas with the play, what you're talking about, like a Broadway play, they want your vision up there.
They want you in the rewrites, and you have more control. When you sell a script to a movie, you're done. You sold it. It's gone. You don't have any creative control over it anymore, unless you're a big name. But when you sell a play, you don't give up rights to that forever, and you may just give it up for that one production, and then they have ancillary rights after that. But you're really just selling it for that one-time use. And I guess... someone was talking to us. That was a note from heaven above. Rich, stop talking.
No, that was our security. I apologize.
Okay, but anyway, so that's where we were. You know, you just you have more to say in a play.
Okay,
as a writer.
And for you, Adrienne, had you ever thought about doing anything other than just now you're writing a screenplay? Did you ever think about writing a play?
No, I really haven't thought about any of this. Like, I haven't thought about, as I said, I'm mainly into skits, which are very interesting because I feel like skits are very different. I mean, there's a bit of spontaneity about them, but there's also a bit of, structure with a skit. So there's that. And then I'm more into short films. That's kind of where I am right now, which is great to hear all of you guys. But I'm curious. You guys mentioned a lot of things about, like, optioning and things like that. So what exactly is that? I don't really understand that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we can talk about that,
Good.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. Is every
she
bit
asked
of it.
the question.
Right.
We probably should answer it. So optioning is when some production company, producer, agency comes to you and says, we want to have exclusive rights to this property, the screenplay, for a specific amount of time. So we're going to pay you, let's just use these general terms, we're going to pay you $1,000, and we're going to hold those rights for 18 months or 12 months, whatever it may be. And during that time, we have the exclusive rights to develop it. No one else can develop it. So basically, that's what the option is.
So you're pretty much taking your work off the table at that point.
You're taking it off the market, yes.
Yeah.
So you guys have talked about Golden Gate. So, I mean, you said you wrote that before 9/11.
Yeah.
So, where is it now, I guess, is the question. So is it still in someone's hands?
No, it's only a 1 or a 2 year option with that company at the time. So now it's in files.
It's in my desk.
Yes, it's in drawers.
Okay.
When you option, there's 3 things you got to consider: how long, the option period,
Okay.
the payment that you get,
Okay.
and then what happens if it gets made into a movie, and that's the big one. Do you still get a cut? Are you left out?
That's what I want to hear too.
Right.
Because if they paid you already an option for the movie, that's just saying we're going to give you $2,000 to not do anything else and try it option. Don't give it to anyone else. We are interested in it. We may produce it.
Correct.
So we don't want you shopping this around.
Correct.
That's pretty much what the option is. But then if they don't want it, you have to go back out there and shopping it around again. And that's an interesting take on that, Adrienne, because I'd like to know myself. The longer you do that, how long can you hold on to that piece and keep trying to go out there and sell it? If you option it for 1 year and they don't want it, and then you option it for another year and they don't want it.
Well, you can do it indefinitely as long as the product is
and
viable.
it's not been out there, so
Right.
but no one knows about it.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
As long as someone else is interested in it, if the option expires with the first production company, you can go now and shop it everywhere. The problem is sometimes they'll tie that up for years on end. They're going to pay you this fee and then tie up that property for a long time, so you're done with it. And it makes it difficult to get back into it, to put it back out there if it's been sitting in a production office for 5 years while they were.
And we hear
trying to
that all
shop
the
it.
time with movies.
Mm-hmm. We have a book, actually. Is it Tarot? Never Fear Tarot. We have a book. Jeff and I wrote stories that are in a book called Never Fear the Tarot, and it's right now has an option on it. The book that's a novel, not a screenplay, but the novel has.
It's an anthology.
An anthology, yes, has an option on it for development for a television series in LA right now, and that's a 2-part option because the first option is to find interest in developing the stories in this anthology for a television series.
Okay.
Then it'll go into another option where we're actually optioned to produce.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know you've heard of the little film called Fried Green Tomatoes.
Yeah.
Okay, and I believe Fannie Flagg, her book came out 20 years earlier, and she had been trying for 20 years to get that made into a movie. So I guess that's an example of it doesn't matter how old the property is, because it could always be updated anyway to fit that time period.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, and films go in cycles. So, like maybe Golden Gate, for example, which was that Die Hard on a Bridge, what isn't popular immediately following 9/11, but now it's been a good amount of time after, and maybe they need those kind of films again. And so you can take that product and put it back out there. Maybe we actually should do that.
Well, and the other thing, I'm doing that. I'm actually doing that.
Add cell phones. And
My first book was The Emblem.
Oh, yeah.
And The Emblem was a government espionage. But at the time I wrote it, which it came out in 1995, we didn't have 9/11. We didn't even have the Oklahoma City yet. So everyone thought that will never happen in the United States. So you're right. And, just go back out there, revise it, and that's what I'm doing, and put it back out there again. I'm sure there's someone who'd be interested.
I've got a question. If you have something optioned for, say, a year, and they decide, whoever it is that you've gone with, decides to take it, and can they run with it and change it any way they want to?
Yes.
Yes, they can. So if they option it and then it goes into production, now you're going to have a different contract. You're going to go into a production contract. And then that'll have to be negotiated. And then all the rights that you want or all the control that you may want, you're going to have to negotiate into that contract. So they can run with it because as most novice or entry-level screenwriters, you're not going to have any control. And we would be perfectly happy. Run with it. Who cares? We just want to be.
As long as we get compensated.
Yeah, we want to be a produced screenwriter.
Right.
So that's important.
Yeah.
But with an optioned project, once you sell it, is your name going to be on it?
Yeah, that's something
you would hope so, and you would expect it. But I mean, it could just be story by.
Story by, right?
All right.
Depending on what all the changes they make.
Mm-hmm.
So. All right, a little bit here though. If it's optioned and you say you option it for $2,000, okay, and now they pick it up in that option contract, does it say they have to pay you X amount of dollars if it's produced?
No.
So you have to negotiate that all over again. Okay, because that's my question. If they paid you $2,000 for the option, what guarantee do you have how much more money they're going to pay you?
Well, because then it goes into a production contract, and then you negotiate that contract.
So that's a separate contract from the option itself. And okay.
An option, just think of an option as a holding agreement.
Okay.
You agree to let me hold this property for as long as we've agreed for a specific amount of money so I can see if someone else out there or my company will produce it. Then you go into another contract altogether.
So
it's
then they'll
like
come back to you and
then
say,
buying.
here's now what we're willing to pay you to produce the movie.
Yeah.
And an option could be a double-edged sword, too. I mean, it's great. Someone's interested in your movie and they want to make it, but maybe they don't. Maybe they don't do anything with it and it's sitting there for 12 months, and it's kind of frustrating as well. Mm-hmm. So you really have to, I think, figure out if the person who options it, what they're going to do with it, how interested they are in it, and where they're going to take it.
Now,
I think there's a lot of truth in that. A lot of beginning screenwriters will go, "Oh, yeah, someone wants to option my film, and then or my screenplay, and then you give it to them as an option, and then it's done, it's off the market, and maybe this production company is tying it up because they're producing something that's similar to that, and they don't want your screenplay to go out there." So everyone jumps at the option, but you really have to think about it. Well, what am I doing if I option this? What am I doing to my career? What am I doing with this particular property? Will it open other doors for me if I don't option it? Is that a better way to go? Is it great to be called an option screenwriter? Well, I don't know.
What's interesting is that we're talking about options. How long have you been involved in options? I mean, I'm going to give you an example. When I won't say the year. I'll just say how old I was. When I was 21, many moons ago, I had someone who was interested in the very first piece I ever wrote, and it was called "It Snowed in Las Vegas." And this woman who read it, who worked for me, actually had a brother in Hollywood, and she said, "If you don't mind, James, can I pass this along to my brother to read and see if he'd be interested?" I didn't even know how to protect my rights or anything like that. I was just a kid writing as a hobby. Her name was Minnie Cudner, so I'm thinking who in Hollywood's last name would be Cudner? All right. Well, we forget that everyone uses pseudonyms. So she took this script and she gave it to her brother, who happened to be Jay Summers. Jay Summers was the producer, director, and writer for Green Acres. And what he was doing, he was looking for a piece for another television series. It didn't necessarily have to be comedy that he could pitch to the studios. He was in his 80s at that time. And as it turned out, there was another little show out there called Hotel that was had been green-lighted. So mine was so similar that they backed out on it. Now, we didn't have an option. I didn't even have it protected. He actually had us write 16 episodes after that to go along with the 2-hour pilot. I didn't ask for any money.
Did you get paid?
No, nothing.
No.
So that would be on spec.
Well, nowadays I know.
Yeah.
But back then, we're talking years ago, I guess it was a little freer. I guess now because of legality reasons, they have to create these contracts to bind to someone so that someone can't go out there. They really could have just taken that and there would have been nothing we could do about it.
Right.
Well, we had that happen. We had our television pilot, the Cooking with Romance show, was taken by another cooking network and developed into a different series, but same premise all the way. So, but you can't do anything about that. We had shopped it out there. We had shopped that pilot to that specific company, and then they said no to us. But then 6 months down the road, they debuted a new show that was just like our show.
Yeah,
and it just could be coincidence, but there's not a lot you can do in that.
Well, in my case, the book had already been out, Hotel, and they had already taken and revamped it into a television series. So there's no doubt that happened because it was on television. So, but anyway, that's just part of what's interesting about how the industry is changing. And I think it's because of so many people getting ripped off. By at least having that option, if they're out there shopping it, there's proof that this is a product that's already been paid for. So if you're trying to duplicate it. And that's something. Yeah, go ahead, Adrienne.
Well, we had talked. You're talking about like protecting your work or whatever. I had heard a rumor, I guess, that if you put a script into an envelope and then you mail it to yourself and you never open it, then it's like considered, like, what is the word?
Copyright. But it is copywritten from inception.
It's
your computer date on that computer file where you first wrote it, or even if you've dated, as long as you can prove when you created the work, that's your copyright. There's a misconception between copyright and registration. Registration is when you're registering that copyright, that you're actually registering the work that you have already written with the U.S. Library of Congress.
Right.
And now I think with all the Google Drive and OneDrive, you're even more protected.
Right.
Because even if someone steals your computer or your computer breaks, it's still there.
Well, and the truth is you're not totally protected anyway because we don't have millions of dollars to go up and fight the lawyers of a studio.
Well, and the truth is people can take your work and they can alter it. And
so easy, right.
It's done every day.
Right.
All these movies, there's a new movie. I'm not going to mention the movie, but there's a new movie coming out about someone whose child was kidnapped or whatever. Well, that's been redone 3 or 4 different ways,
exactly.
So they can take your work and create whatever they want from it. So there is a misnomer when someone says, "Oh, don't be afraid if you're Hollywood. If you go there and you pitch your work, that doesn't mean necessarily they're going to steal it." Well, they may not steal that exact work, but they certainly can take the concept and
it seems to take place more in L.A. I think, I shouldn't say L.A., but more within the film industry than like in the publishing industry.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know. I never worry about it when we're writing books or a story.
I don't think I've ever heard of
it. Right. It doesn't even come into my mind. But when we were in L.A. working, We thought about it all the time.
Okay, but that's another great thing about what we talked about. Instead of putting the script out first, the movie, it's probably smarter to go back and revamp that and make it a novel. So at least you have that novel out there. So at least if someone sees a movie that's similar, they go, that's just like the book I read, you know. So that's probably another reason why you might want to think about doing it that way.
Very smart. I told you, you've got a class today.
All right. When it comes to... Oh, okay. Right. When script writing software... Well, we talked a little bit about script writing software and who uses what. What do you think... I'm going to be honest with you. Script writing software can be expensive for some people. If you're just starting out, like... I'm not going to mention the number one out there and how expensive they are, but...
Well, you already mentioned it.
I know, but it didn't...
Final draft.
Much, right? Yeah. You know, they're around $295 if you don't already have one version of it. You can get an upgraded version for a lot less. But, you know, I know there's new versions out there. Like I use Fade-In. Fade-In actually will convert your files from Screenwriter or Final Draft, or there's different ones out there that you can get, or Movie Magic, and they'll put it into a format you can use in Fade-In, which is a very inexpensive script writing program. And then they ask, what is it, Celtic or something? There's a couple more out there. Oh, yeah. All right, I'll let you go ahead.
Our research department
Our
right now is
research
Googling it.
Adrienne?
Hey, this might be a dumb question. Do you write your script in the program, or do you just write it out on paper and then, or do you type it in another, like in Word, and then put it in
I'm an oddball. I actually am just like when you do novels. I will write on a scrap piece of paper, on a napkin or whatever, and when I get ready, it depends. And I'll go and I'll sit down and then I'll start putting it into script format. Although I had my very first one that I actually wrote as a screenplay was a dream, and I put it in a Word when they had word processors. I put it. I would wake up, type it in, go back to sleep, or sort of go back to sleep, and pick up where I left off. And about every hour and a half or so, I would get up out of bed, and I was on vacation at this time too, and I would type in what I had dreamed, and then go back, lay down, finish dreaming. I've done that a lot since. But anyway, we talked about this on one show. There's an actual name for that. It's
about 1.5 feet long.
Yeah. It's not a disease. Thank God. But you know, there is a name for that when people do that, and I actually write that way a lot of my work, and I'll actually get up in the morning and I'll either type it in. That particular one was The Emblem, which was my first novel, and I actually wrote it that way. It was the script first. It was a screenplay first. But yeah, I write in several different ways. I don't have one formula for writing. A lot of people do, and I know that. J.K. Rowling does the same technique I told you about, where she'll write on a scrap piece of paper or a napkin or whatever.
Yeah, she actually has a chart, too. It's online. You can just Google it, about how she outlines everything. And it was just so involved. I tried to do it for a story idea, and it was just so involved. I spent so much time doing the outline that I didn't want to write the story anymore. It was like, okay, I'm over this. It was just, but for some people that works really, really well.
Well, that's world building, right?
Yes.
Like she's creating the whole Harry
How
Potter
do you write?
world.
Yeah.
Jeff, how do you write?
I don't really jot things down. I just write, and when Rich and I were working together, it would drive him crazy. Like if we were typing, and I wanted to change something, I would want to change it stop what we're doing and change it right then and there.
Okay.
And I've kind of weaned myself away from that.
Okay.
And I just write, and then I figured out later. Stephen King said, your first draft is for you, your second draft is for the audience.
Okay.
Now, in terms of just writing, are you writing in the software or are you writing on paper?
In the software.
And then are you able to share the same, so you guys have the same software, so you're able to see each other's updates and things like that?
But I can understand why that would drive Rich crazy, because if you have an idea, well, and plus if you have an idea, it might have been a good idea, and if you're just getting rid of that and putting something else in there, there may have been a take on that he was thinking about, like, we could go this direction with that idea, but now you just got rid of it, we moved on. So,
but when you're writing prose, you know, like a short story or a novel, for me, it's easier just to go with the flow and just write and write and write. With a script, because of the structure, I think it kind of slows you down sometimes, and you can't. For me, I can't always get in that groove. You know, that writing groove where it just seems to write itself.
Well, one of the things I learned in the script writing class I've been taking or have taken in the past is that you think what you've written is great. We all do, no matter who we are. We think when we're done, it's fantastic. But what he taught you to do is you had to do it. It was an exercise. You had to rewrite it 8 different ways.
Oh.
It gave you 8 different perspectives on what you're writing. And I hated it. I thought, this is hard. I can't do this.
Was it just a scene?
Yes, but you do that with each scene. You had to do that with each scene. And the thing is that you learn so much from that. You realize, wait a minute, that character really could have done this, and it was so much better. So it doesn't necessarily mean you changed everything or that you changed anything, but it gave you a new perspective on what your character could do. And it kind of did help. It is hard. I'm going to tell you right now. It was very difficult.
So 8 different ways. I guess I'm not following this.
Okay.
So
Let's just say, for instance, we're at the grocery store, and you're there to buy a carton of milk. And you run into someone's cart. And this is someone you've never met before, and then they introduce themselves, and you're thinking, where have I seen them before? Okay. But now you want to go back and say, now you're not at a grocery store. Now you're walking down the street, and you run into them on the street. You bump elbows. And you're going, where have I seen that person before? I mean, what you're doing is you're creating different avenues in which you could go with this character, because later on it may have been important for you to be outside and on the street because there's something else happening out there that played better into that script as opposed to being in a grocery store.
I think, like in acting terms, we would think of it as like improv. Here's the scenario. Now improv it. Now you're going to switch partners, and the improv is going to be different. So it's just kind of getting that mindset about it.
yeah, and that's why I wanted the clarification, because I wasn't sure if you were changing locations or if you were just changing perspective.
You could do both. You could do it to where now instead of running into one person with a shopping cart, you could have tripped over something and hit an aisle, knocked something off, and they picked it up for you in the grocery store. So in other words, what they're saying is don't pigeonhole yourself to that one scene. You know, see if maybe there's a broader perspective out there that will enhance what you're trying to say or do.
In terms of characters, you're rounding out the characters, too. Because
Yes.
you have to figure out why are they on the street, why are they in the store,
Right.
why are they at the airport, wherever you put them.
I use this a lot. I've used this a lot on the radio for my first novel in the sense that I had a character who was with the Secret Service. And he was the buddy of someone else who was going through the service, and he was basically his training partner. Well, they were going to Georgia, to Savannah, Georgia, and while they were there at her father's cabin, he was going to propose to her. It kind of didn't make sense that this guy who had become friends with, even though they were in the Secret Service together, tagged along with him. But I'd already written it that way. And I thought, this isn't really, it's very uncomfortable because why would he be proposing to her when he's got his buddy there with him? So I had to go back and I rewrote the whole thing to where now he's married. So that when they went to Savannah, his wife went with him. That way they could go off on their own, and he was alone with his fiancée, Nikki, and he proposed to her. So that's an example of what I'm talking about. Don't pigeonhole your one way of thinking about it. You know, give yourself options to be able to create, you know, something around that character. And don't be afraid to add another character if you have to.
It's almost like discovery writing.
Yeah.
Like some of us are discovery writers where we write anything we think of at the time and then let that develop. And I think what you're saying is even if you do that, there might be more to discover with that discovery.
Right.
So look at it another way.
Yeah, yeah. And it really added a lot to the book because once I had her involved, where now he's married, she actually became a focal point at one point in the movie, or in the book. Well, it was the script first. She actually became an important character, especially because I have a sequel to this, and she became a main character in the sequel. So that's why it's amazing if you just allow yourself to think about it further. And Jeff, I get what you're saying. You maybe like the second idea better, but don't throw away the first one.
Right.
Because maybe you may have to go back to that first one and say, well, maybe we could have made that work by just...
And there might be elements of that you want to keep.
Yeah, exactly. All right. And so I'm all over the place here.
That's okay.
Please,
we'll
Rich,
follow.
say something.
So, like when I was writing with Jeff, let's talk a minute about writing screenplays as partners. So Jeff and I were writing, and we did use script software, but I think at the time we only had one computer, and we just wrote on that one computer, right? We
Yeah.
sat side by side, and we didn't have to share it because the internet wasn't quite as developed as it is now, and we didn't have the software to do it. But we sat there with software, and we would write
And we used a lot
ideas.
of 3x5 cards.
Oh, yeah, we did. We would sit there. Sometimes we go to the park and we just outline thoughts and ideas on the 3x5 cards, and then we would put them down into the script. My thing is that once I write something, I just move on. I leave it. And maybe being dyslexic and having all those red squiggle lines all over the computer screen doesn't bother me because they're all over it for me all the time anyway, but it drove Jeff crazy. So every day when we went back, the next day when we'd go back to write, he wanted to correct all those squiggle lines.
And I still do that.
And
when I sit down to work on
drives me
something, the
nuts.
first thing I do the next day is go back and I reread everything I've written and I fix everything.
And I don't. I start from where I ended and I just go on.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when do you want to fix it? At the very end?
At the end, then I go back and I do the second draft.
I just fix like the spelling and the grammar and the stuff. Maybe it's because I'm a teacher, and that kind of stuff drives me crazy.
So that that actually kind of talks about an editor in some ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I would like to talk about an editor now that you brought it up.
Good job.
Thank you, Adrienne. Nice little segue there. When it comes to editing a play, a script, and a novel, how much difference is there, and what are you looking for?
I think it's a big difference.
Yeah,
okay.
I wouldn't even know how to begin with a screenplay, to be honest.
Okay.
I mean, I'm assuming there are screenplay editors. I've never even really thought about it, to be honest.
We had to edit our own. We had friends who were also in the industry, and they would read it for us and give us ideas.
I think that's the difference, though,
Yeah.
because in a screenplay, you're actually, with a play, you're on the stage, so you're actually seeing it played out.
Oh,
a screenplay is kind of played out with the characters, but you still need someone to kind of tighten that up.
So with my plays, I was sitting in rehearsal with the plays. When it was being both in New York and in L.A., I was sitting right there in the theater during the rehearsals, and the director would often turn to me and say, okay, that's not quite working for us. What else can we do? Or an actor would come on stage and say, hey, I'm going to try something. Let's see if it works. And they would do it, and I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. Let me put it in because it's going on my page.
So
it looks like I did
organic.
it. Yeah, and it looks like I wrote it, and I was like, oh, okay, that's great for me.
You're getting credit for it.
Yeah, it was great. And then in a novel, of course, you're going to write it and then send it out to be professionally edited. You have to, because they look at the written word so much more importantly. The written word has a lot of weight to it in a novel. In a play, it doesn't have so much because you're going to develop it. And in a screenplay, we never sent it out. We just had friends read them and help us.
So I'm watching this show right now, and it's all about publishing. And so how much does the editor have to say in a novel? Like, is it ultimately the novelist's final say, or does the editor really have final say?
I think it depends on who the novelist is and who the editor is. Yeah. Like someone like Heather Graham, she can call her own shots. And I think you do see that with really successful writers as they get older. They get a little bit more verbose, and maybe their editors kind of back off a little bit. But if you're a novice, the editor's king. Oh,
on one of the books that I've written, I'm not going to mention the name again, the editor actually sent me back the entire manuscript, reworked. So she said, I want these first 80 pages moved to here, and I want this here, and I want this there. So I had to rework the whole thing, and it was tough. But they almost did what's called a book doctor in a sense. She wasn't a book doctor; she was the editor, but she really changed everything around. I mean, there were arrows written all over, and notes said that this scene needs to go at the end. Wow. Yeah,
I think so much more in a novel because of the fact that it's so technical. Readers out there look for errors. I'm sorry, but they do. A lot of people are actually looking, I got to find that first mistake they made. And so it's a very technical thing in making sure that your syntax is correct. Not necessarily the verbiage of someone speaking, because we do use slangs or whatever, but that's important. Whereas with the screenplay, your actors are going to act it out for you on stage, and you have your directors and producers or whoever's there.
But it still has to sound true.
It still has to sound true, right. But it's not going to be as technical as the book. My editors rip mine apart. I'm just telling you right now.
But I guess my biggest question is, okay, so you've written this screenplay, and now someone's optioning it, and now they've decided to actually produce it. So where does the editing come in? Is the editing before you even get it even optioned?
Yeah, edit it should be before you option it.
That's very important.
So the editing comes before you even option it, and then once they now they own it, so now they're paying you for it. And then, they can literally massacre it.
You're done. Now you're done.
Right.
So so they could massacre it. So there could be like another edit.
In a perfect world, they would have you edit your own work, but
oftentimes the people in the industry, whether it's a director or producer or even an actor, they'll want it rewritten. Oftentimes, you sell your work. It's not what you wrote. It's been completely, a script editor has gone in and changed everything. Yeah,
that's a good way. It really is your concept. A script, screenwriting is writing a concept, an idea, a thought, but it's not actually what's going to show up on the screen.
Unless you produce it yourself.
Unless you're Quentin Tarantino.
Well, yeah, but then you got to be kind of a name, or you got to
that's what I'm saying.
And
you got to work your way up.
One of the things I've learned too is that you you have to make sure it reads well, though. I mean, even though you have the idea in your mind, they can take this and rewrite it and do whatever they want when it comes to a screenplay. It still has to be written well, and it still has to be in a way that when it gets in front of their eyes, they visualize it and they understand it.
And in my opinion, I mean, especially as an actor and working on some independent films, and it's something you can talk with Kelly about later, you know, it's almost good to have those different avenues because when you're the writer, the editor, the director, the producer, you've got this piece that is beautiful in your mind and you understand it, but then the rest of the world is like, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a mistake even authors can make sometimes when they want to dispute what an editor has tried to tell them to do, is that we think because we see things. The hardest part about writing a book is getting on paper what you visualize in your mind. Whereas in the script, if you're writing a movie, you have to get the idea there, but then you still have your actors and your directors who can help enhance that. And with a play, it's like Rich was saying a while ago, when they're on stage, they're going to help formulate that for you and make it sound better. But the book, you have to have that visualization on paper. It has to be there so that the reader can comprehend what you're saying. They can't just write a line and let them imagine the rest. You have to have the whole picture there.
Yeah, we always read all of our stories and novels out loud. So we'll sit there with people that either are not familiar with the story and then read it out loud to them, or read it out loud to someone you know, friends.
Like a table read, or more so just like
almost
it
like
is
a
like a
table
table read.
Right? But it's just me reading it, for example. So I'm going to read it, and you're going to listen to it, and you're going to say things. A table read would be an awesome idea.
Writers groups.
It would be. The only difficulty is knowing where the narration comes and everything. It's hard to set up a novel for a table read because it's not. It doesn't say who's going to talk when. You know, it's just part of it.
But I do
it's
that
like a table read.
I say, and I know I don't read necessarily in front of someone, but I found that just by verbalizing it, it actually helps. Because I think it's perfect on paper, but then when I start saying it out loud, I'm thinking, oh, God, that's kind of clumsy.
Especially for a script.
Yeah, especially for a script. But even with a novel, you know, I realize sometimes it doesn't read as well. The narrative doesn't read as well unless you read it out loud. So I'm like Rich on that. I like to read it out loud.
I always read everything out loud. And then sometimes you're reading it and you're going, what the heck did I just say? What is that?
Yeah.
Or have someone else read your story to you is another good way, because they're going to mess up on things that you think are so clear, and they're going to get caught on something, and then it doesn't make sense to them.
You know, one thing that is important, too, is making sure that when... Well, I forgot what my train of thought was now. People, go ahead. I'm getting old. Never mind.
It's making sure that you have
there was a point. I'm just not sure what the point was. But, you know, we're actually running out of time. I can't believe that an hour has almost already gone by. This is amazing.
Wow.
We're good at this now.
I know. We've had a little bit of practice, haven't we?
Practice makes us perfect.
All right. I would like to thank our guests, Adrienne McLean, Jeff DePew, and Richard Devin, along with my co-host, Janet Coursey. And, of course, the show will be logged on YouTube at youtube.com/Aspect of Writing. And then you can also go to aspectsofwriting.com, and we actually now post the audio on there as well as the video link is on there for YouTube. In fact, you can just watch it right there on our website.
Yeah.
It's a wave. So until next time, this is your host, James Kelly, saying, if you can dream it, you can write it. Or reminding you, I should say. You got that, Rich?
I got it. I got the shot.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Great show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we clear?